And coming up next is somebody you may have heard about in the news during the last 2 years, where you were told to stay home, and so many people did, and so many people didn't. How many times did you get COVID?
Twice
Hey,
times.
here I sit next to you, and I never caught it. Isn't that amazing? See, that is the reason, the difference between you and I. I have a history that has to do with public health. I don't believe that public health is tyranny, and I don't believe that spreading around misinformation necessarily is a good thing.
You think I think public health is tyranny? I think we
No, I don't think you. No, you don't think that. you just don't want to pay attention to. No, you were out and about.
I'm just a stoner and forget to wear my mask, man.
And you were in a a necessary business, right?
Yeah,
exactly right. And one of the necessary businesses you have to have out there is informing the public. There's a difference between fear and awareness. A friend of mine from the CIA used to say. And that means basically those people who are afraid run away from the situation, and those people who are aware are able to figure out how to resolve the problem. And in this, I would like to introduce our next guest here, Ms. Rebekah Jones. I say Ms. I know you're a married lady. We saw your house in that viral video where they came over and knocked on your door because you dared go up against the governor and tell him that he wasn't quite putting out all the information that needed to be out. So they went ahead and knocked on your door. And now you've gone from being the avenger of COVID and actually getting the information out there to running against one of our favorite people here in the state of Florida in regards to Congressional District 1. Gates, for those people who are not aware, helped work on the first bill. Ended up being SB 1030, which started the cannabis industry here in the state of Florida. Then he went to Washington D.C. and kind of went bonkers, as anybody could see. And to that end, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Rebekah Jones. Rebekah, how are you doing today?
Good. I am in my car with my entire family. So if it's a little loud or bumpy, let me just apologize ahead of time. But thank you guys for having me on.
Well, just what's up to the fam, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but guys, you
okay. There they are. Hi.
Hi.
But she will stop the car and turn the car around. So be careful. So I guess the first question I have is, what made you decide to do a 180 and go from being public servant to hoping to serve the public?
Well, I've always worked in public service. When I graduated from college, I could have just taken my education and worked for the oil and gas industry and made a lot of money. But that's not what I wanted. That's not how I was raised. So I went into public service to be a scientist. And I was planning on spending the rest of my life in public service until, COVID and the governor decided to intervene. And so I want to keep doing it. And I think I was for a long time trying to figure out what exactly that looked like. For a while, it was just doing the news, making sure that people had correct information. And I think that I've gotten a little frustrated with seeing that you could be on the news, 5 times a day all over the country. And unless you're one of the people who's making the laws, it can only do so much. And I grew up in this area that I'm running in, and I'm very unfortunately familiar with Matt Gatez before this happened. So I heard about the sex trafficking investigation, and I thought, you know what, that's enough. I'm tired of waiting for somebody else to stand up and do the right thing. I'm going to do it myself. And, if I don't win, then at least I tried. At least I did something different. But we're going to win. So it's going to work.
CD1 is interesting. I mean, all the time. I always say it's a one-horse town and the horse is on meth. But it is a diverse district between
Breaking Bad for horses.
I mean, even just Pensacola versus Pensacola Beach, you can tell you've got a huge swing in regards to the different types of people that you have out that way. And I know Matt's father, Don, very interesting guy, good old country lawyer, country pharmacist, and yet he actually was very much into cannabis, though he wouldn't say so much. When Matt was growing up, that was one of the reasons that he actually got involved in this. So we are evolving. I think we can get past Matt, but we need to have somebody who gets it, who gets the fact that truth
Here-
is kind of important.
Matt Gatez, that well, probably the second thing that pisses me off the most about him. Probably the first thing's the sex trafficking, but the second thing that pisses me off the most about him, I'm just gonna say one of the things that pisses me off about him, is it's honestly like how Gary introduced him. Like, we have to say that he played a hand in the cannabis industry here in Florida, and the truth is that he ruined it. He destroyed it. You know what I mean? He made it possible for this system to be this oligopoly. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Oligopoly, right? I swear I'm an MBA. he made it possible for this oligopoly, and he made it possible to like take small business out of the cannabis industry. I really the fact that sometimes the rhetoric goes in his favor in this way, and I really would like what you would do to kind of like correct that.
Well, I think first of all, we need to be legalizing marijuana for recreational use nationwide and allow people to grow it themselves, and certainly allow them to have small businesses to do it. Yeah, I know that Matt Gatez has tried to create this image of himself that he's so pro marijuana, but he was only ever interested in controlling the licenses that were issued to make sure they only went into a handful of people that he was politically or financially connected with. So he was hardly a champion of marijuana, although I will say being pro marijuana in any sense is an improvement over a lot of the conservatives that we have. Still, this has been a fight that we've been in since they made it illegal. It's as ridiculous as prohibition was when they made a constitutional amendment for it. It's well past time. You know, we're finally looking to take it off the Schedule 1 drugs list, but that's not enough. We need to be making it legal nationwide. It would completely reimagine our entire prison system, our entire judicial system. I mean, think of all of the people who have records that could be expunged for something as simple as possession or, distribution of small amounts of marijuana that are now barred from all kinds of activities, from jobs, from background checks, when it was not wasn't a harmful crime. There's a lot that we could do that would completely revolutionize how we view the war on, drugs and personal use. And so I'm absolutely in favor of that all the way.
Now, you and I have a lot of background things in common. I worked for the Centers for Disease Control for a good portion of 2 decades, helped to create CDC Wonder and the VAERS and things of that sort. So I was really dismayed when I saw that one of the big pushes in politics is to disseminate. And that's actually one of the reasons that we have the cannabis program as we are right now, because misinformation was spread back in the turn of the century and into 1937 and again 1970 when the Controlled Substance Act, and it's all basically based on information which was not verifiable. And science is repeatable, verifiable information. And so and any kind of law that is actually based on misinformation eventually will become legitimate if they say it long enough and people forget the fact that it was illegitimate in the first place. And that's what I was concerned about in regard to COVID, that if people actually believed every single thing that came out as far as misinformation is concerned, we would go down the wrong path, and this pandemic would be endemic forever, essentially. And that is kind of what we dealt with.
It's been a while. I mean, I'm probably just more eager than most to have that chapter of my life closed. I've caught COVID twice. I got it in January of 21, and actually just a few weeks ago at Leadership Blue in Tampa, which ended up being a super spreader event. I'm more prepared than anybody to get over it and for that chapter to be closed, but that's not what people like Ron DeSantis wanted. And that is why we continue to struggle as much as we do. And of course, now we're seeing this anti-vaccine movement that had existed but was mostly fringe and slowly gaining ground explode. And I'm sure you've heard recently that monkeypox is at a large risk right now to become a pandemic, and they've been warning about it for about 16 years now. I think it was 16 years ago first said if this man is to find a pocket of people who are not inoculated against smallpox, this could be a pandemic. And it happened. And just so anybody's listening know, monkeypox is much more similar to smallpox than it is chickenpox. They're not like chickenpox, so please don't confuse those. that's not the same thing. It's just pox.
Well, for those people who go around checking out people's shoulders during the summer when people are wearing sleeveless things, those people who have a little circle on their shoulder are the ones that had the smallpox vaccine back in the 60s and 70s. Thing. I was part of the smallpox eradication team, so I knew exactly how we can actually end something. And I know that the fact that medical tyranny is not really a thing.
Can you still get monkeypox if you smoke weed?
Okay. Monkeypox is not spread by casual contact.
Hold on, because I know that you can't get COVID.
It depends on what you do with your pre-rolls, I suppose.
I know you can't get COVID if you smoke weed. So can you get smallpox if you smoke weed?
I'm not sure that first statement is true, so I would have no scientific foundation for the second one to be able to say.
Wait, I don't know what science journals you guys are reading, but I saw on Facebook.
Oh, well, if Facebook says it, then it must be true.
Yes. I actually heard that monkeypox, according to the folks on YouTube, actually was spread by the original group called the Monkeys. They were the first ones.
Yeah,
that's why it was named that.
I've been smoking weed since I was 17. I've never been sick.
Well, I'm sure those two things are causal, right? The monkeypox originated from I think it was the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so now it's in the United States. It's in Florida. My sister's actually an ER nurse in South Mississippi, and she might have it. I found that out yesterday. So it's spreading quickly, and it's going to be another thing that hopefully it's not nearly as lethal as COVID was, but it's not going to be fun either. And, we now have made our country almost anti-medicine, which is a real shame because we're a place where some of the most advanced scientific, and medical innovations are from. And just listen to your doctors, people. They're trying to keep you alive. That would be my advice.
Now, of course, we have our Surgeon General here in the state of Florida, who was a doctor that stood in front of the Supreme Court and said that you need to go ahead and use malaria medication to go ahead and get rid of COVID. So, he
called him Dr. Demon Semen. So, he was at that panel of supposedly frontline responders, even though he's never worked in a hospital, he's never been a licensed physician. They all pretty much were not first responders for COVID. And he's there when this woman starts going off about how the vaccine has demon sperm in it, and it was, going to do all these horrible things to women in their souls. And he's sitting there nodding. And so, we call him Dr. Demon Semen.
Boy. And of course, with all due respect to Dr. Latipo, because he is our Surgeon General, we have to give him a certain amount of respect. And he does have a huge job. But anything he says that's wrong can have immense butterfly effects kind of situations. Like, for instance, somebody whispered in DeSantis' ear this last week that the more boosted you get, the more chance you have of getting COVID.
The more what?
the more boosted you get, the more chance you have of getting COVID. They were using a CDC graphic which showed that people who were boosted have a slightly higher degree of COVID. However, that may be behavioral as opposed to actual viral, because of the fact that people who are boosted oftentimes take more chances.
Are more, well, it's also not that. It's that and the fact that the people who get boosted are inherently more COVID conscious and are more likely to get themselves tested if they start to come down with symptoms, versus those who don't believe in vaccines, don't believe COVID's real, and won't go to a clinic and actually take a test. There's a huge concern right now that we're massively underreporting, because home tests pretty much can tell you with a high level of accuracy whether or not you're positive. I mean, when my family caught it a few weeks ago, I was the only one who went to a clinic and actually got tested. So only one of the four of us counted. But yeah, it's also a psychological thing. If you went and got all the boosters and everything, you're more likely to get tested if you actually got sick.
Yeah.
And of course, the situation was he totally ignored the line on the graphic, which showed that anybody who is not vaccinated has a huge amount of cannabis. Wrong topic. as a huge amount of COVID, and so therefore, just ignoring that one line, that slight propaganda by omission, automatically makes it look as if that particular fact is real. Don't get boosted because you'll get COVID. is totally wrong. It's just a matter of cherry picking your facts and switching things around. And that is how cannabis became
Rebekah, like
legal in this country.
I'm seeing a theme here in this entire conversation. It's just like the country's not trusting science anymore. That's just what it
really
is.
should just not be trusting, people like DeSantis.
Well, I agree, and quite honestly, like the mission of this organization and the whole COVID pandemic, it lays in the same. There's misinformation out there, spread for political gain, right? That victimize cannabis users, right, or victimizes people that are ending up with COVID, right? I really would like to hear your thought on how we can get back to a science-based world. Like, I really don't understand how we got here in the first place, first off, because like, I mean, most of the country just does not trust. You bring up that a scientist came up with it, right? And they're like, it's false. My preacher needs to, I don't know what it is. I don't want to I tend to pick on religious people quite a bit. I don't want to pick on religious people right now. The fact is that there's people out there that are not trusting scientists. They're trusting whatever it is, marketing, religion, whatever it is, right? How do we get back to a science-based way of thought? She's gone. She's back.
Okay, sorry.
Did you hear me?
Can you say this?
I heard your question. What I was saying, if you go back to like tobacco wars back in the 40s and 50s, they were paying, doctors to do research that actually said that cigarettes were good for you. When I was growing up in the 90s, I was told that one joint is equal to 20 cigarettes, for health. And it's always been there.
I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. The difference between now and then is that there was this kind of understanding within the media that we did not give credence to things that were patently false. And so they fell into some of those traps, obviously, but it was not commonplace to see people spreading misinformation all over. CNN Jake Tapper's show is one of the people that's most guilty of that, or trying to present two views that are not balanced as equal parts, the going out of your way to be contrarian. There was a kind of buffer zone, and partly the internet is to blame with that, because anybody can, start a website and then put craziness on it and, tell people, oh, look at all these like papers that prove that, that this vaccine is dangerous and blah, 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 even though it's not true. But it is a large part is the media. I mean, when schools reopened, we had people on CNN telling people that kids couldn't get COVID, which is false, or that, that schools were somehow a magical barrier to COVID and that teachers and staff would not get sick and die left and right, which was false. They did. And that it wouldn't exacerbate, community spread, which it did. But these people were not just allowed airtime, they were promoted. They were, doing shows left and right. We had people who became staples for this kinds of misinformation that would just do the circuit. And that's something to me that's most egregious, that the media's mishandling of. They don't understand how to handle this kind of information, not realizing that every time they cover one of these things, they're just further propagating this misinformation. And that's one of the biggest problems. It's probably the one that's easiest to fix too, because if we all call the media to stop doing it and we refuse to, watch Jake Tapper or any of those other shows that do it, especially Fox, obviously, then it would stop. But we don't.
Yeah, and of course, now where you live right now, it's Gambia, Santa Rosa County. Big Second Amendment folks out that way.
Yep.
I think it was it Gates or was it Trump who said that up in Pensacola, up in the Panhandle, if anybody disagreed with you, you could always shoot them. That only happens over in the Panhandle.
I'm not sure who said that, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think that was that far off.
It got a big laugh out of the audience, and that made me very uneasy because they were agreeing with him at the time.
Well, it's strange right now for me, I think, because there's actually an FBI manhunt underway for someone who threatened to kill me and my family. about a week and a half ago from my
Holy
district
shit.
who called our cell phones. Didn't block his number, didn't even try to hide who he was. And the FBI has been looking for him since Thursday the 21st. So, yeah, it's
Jeez.
a little more serious right now. I mean, I like brevity and, levity as much as the next person, but there's a difference between, being a pro Second Amendment place and being a pro violence place. And I don't think we're a pro violence place. I think that people understand that they are entitled to certain rights, but that does not give them license to be violent animals. I think that's a common misconception about people. But then there are a handful of people that are dangerous. And this was a Matt Gatez supporter who repeatedly told me he was a Matt Gatez supporter when he texted me over 3 days, telling me that women don't belong in office because we're too emotional and have too many personalities. The guy who threatened to kill my family said that we're too emotional and have too many personalities. But it's not always
Wow.
necessarily tied to the same thing, and I don't want to kind of bash on people that technically, they have those rights. That's the Second Amendment. It exists in the Constitution, and make them seem like everybody up here is crazy and a redneck. And I mean, I grew up in South Mississippi in a place that's a hell of a lot more redneck than this area. And they're not inherently violent people either. They're not going to shoot people for disagreeing with them. But it is also a very serious risk that as a candidate I have to deal with. And right now, more than I have in the past. Which says a lot because I have an entire Twitter troll army dedicated to harassing anybody who says my name 24/7. Strange world.
Wow. And yet you have to be able to work with the GOP as you're moving forward if you're going to have any.
Rebekah, let me just say at the beginning, I thought you were cool. Now I think you're a badass.
Wow,
to be able to stare some shit like that in the face.
You handed out the badass badge without telling me? Wow, that's cool.
Like to stare some shit like that in the face and to keep on going and keep standing for what you're standing for. Good job. Good job.
Thanks.
Now, how do you intend on handling the issue in regards to bipartisanship? I mean, right now you are in a fairly red district. There's no question about that. In order to get past that, you have to find folks who are willing to stride that line and realize that if you are identified strictly by your political party, then you have identity crisis.
Yes,
essentially, that you have to be able to think. And we are thinking very in myopic terms right now in both the left and the right, and that to me is concerning because you can't get things done if you want to be totally one-sided.
correct. And I've never been a totally one-sided person. Most people got to know me as a scientist who was objective and just wanted them to have information, not as a political figure. As much as, DeSantis loved to politicize me, I never spoke out about politics the entire time I was in my role as a science advocate. That was not until he, ordered police to raid my home gunpoint without a warrant.
Wait, what happened? I didn't know
but
that happened.
Okay. Yeah, that was a viral video.
Oh boy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll show it to you later on. I think it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's out there. Yeah, it's out there. But yeah, that's when you thought I was a badass for getting threatened to be killed. You should go look at the video under my head and the gun pointed at my kids. Then you'll really like me. But it's about fairness and trying to be honest with people, and that's not something that we've had in a lot of politics. It's certainly not something we've had from Matt Gatez. People who don't exploit each other or try to turn their neighbors against each other and say, these are the laws that we have to follow them. If we need to change one, then we change one. If we're coming short, if the government is failing to do something, then we need to make up for that, like the PACT Act, which for my district is incredibly important. It was basically the healthcare funding bill for people who are exposed to toxic substances in the military. If somebody loses a limb in the military, then they get $4,560 a month every single month for the rest of their life. But if they acquire, a rare type of cancer from burn pits or, God forbid, Agent Orange exposure, they were paid $3,200 total for their life. And so we don't treat these kind of unseen illnesses the way that we do seen illnesses. And that also goes into PTSD and, suicide and TBIs and other things. And this bill was over a decade in the making, and the GOP shut it down. And it's like that kind of stuff. It's like, look, we made promises, we're going to keep them. That's it. We need infrastructure. We need to pay our teachers. We need to take care of these basic things that affect our actual day-to-day lives and stop arguing about things that are never going to change. And that's kind of how we've been able to do this. Is like people get very upset sometimes and start asking me about abortion. And I try to, understand where they're coming from. But I'm at the same time saying, look, does this impact you on your drive to work? Like, at the end of the month, can you afford to pay all of your bills? And how will changing that help you? And what is the thing that actually impacts your everyday life that I can help you with? And that's what public service is supposed to be. And that's what I'm trying to bring it back to.
Great. I mean, I'm an independent. People know that I'm kind of left leaning, but I want to make certain that I have the ability to go ahead and go after both sides equally to make sure that everybody's doing their jobs, because your political party doesn't necessarily make you right.
No, it does not. No, it does not. Believe me, I could say that, for every political party, that not everybody who runs with your party, whichever one it is a saint. I know that politics is nasty, and there is something to be said about what it would be like if we didn't have parties and people could just run as individuals, and you had to learn about who they were and what they stand for and what they're going to fight for. But the reality is that's not America right now, and we have to deal with the system that we're in until we can make it better.
I mean, Mississippi, where you grew up. By the way, shout out to Barb and Picayune. I'm still thinking about you. we have friends
Barbara,
in all the states around here.
I had my wedding cake made in Picayune. Thank you very much. I did. They have an amazing bakery right off the highway. I forget what it's called, but that's where I had my wedding cake. I got married in Slidell. I grew up in South Mississippi, so that's my back yard.
Don't tell me it was red velvet.
I'm sorry?
Was it a red velvet cake?
No, they were amazing. I actually had cupcakes. They had magnolias on the top of them. It was beautiful.
Very cool.
I got married in a bayou in South Louisiana, so
And Mississippi, in our world, is interesting in regards that they actually passed a ballot initiative to go ahead and legalize cannabis, and yet the governor shut it down, and the legislator shut it down.
Oh, Tater?
Yeah.
Governor Tater? Mississippi, where I grew up, we're used to being at the bottom of the list for pretty much everything. Healthcare, economics, education, wealth, poverty, pretty much if there's a stat out there, we're at the bottom. But I will say this. When I started tracking schools, COVID-19 in schools nationwide with Google, we were the only people who apparently cared enough to do it. Mississippi was the first state in the entire country that started reporting the number of student and staff cases in their schools for every single district in their state. It's the only time I've been like, hey, we were at the first of something that was really good. So that's the only credit I'll ever give Tater, but he deserves that one.
David Banner is also a pretty cool writer. Like there's some cool stuff out of there.
Absolutely, and I have a lot of love for Mississippi. I spent a lot of time in New Orleans and to escape to Mississippi just to find some sanity. Louisiana and Picayune, but that's the way it is.
Well, yeah, I grew up in an area of Mississippi that was more Louisiana, more Cajun than Dixie, we say. Yeah. So.
And sometimes right. Mississippi was just, was segued to Dauphin Island for us. We just have to go past it to get to where else we wanted to go. But we want to see you in Congress. We want to see you successful. What are the major points in your platform right now moving forward?
Well, a return to evidence-based decision-making would be fantastic. So trying to use science, to use data in the most impartial manner to examine issues before we make decisions or make laws on them. We don't do that enough. We don't require studies to see what the impact of something might be on economics or health or the environment. We need to start really, truly assessing that in a nonpartisan way, not with think tanks that, obviously have an agenda. Obviously, we have a lot of issues with most people right now can't afford their bills. And that's the reality. Nobody wants to say it, but our country, especially my state, is becoming unaffordable. Rent is increasing. Inflation's hurting a lot of families. Working class families and Americans are carrying the brunt of the tax burden that keeps our country going, and we need to change that. We need to lower taxes for working Americans and middle class families and the working poor, because right now it's too high. The fact that a teacher who makes 40 pays about the same tax rate as somebody like, and we need to make sure that we're investing in our population and public education, the things that used to define American life. That is what we're fighting for. I didn't grow up rich. Like I said, South Mississippi. My dad's a truck driver. So I know what it's like to struggle every single month just to make ends meet. When you don't buy anything, you don't do anything, you don't have new cars, you don't go on vacation. And it feels like you can't breathe all the time. And I think America really just needs a break. And I think people who keep this country running need to be able to breathe again. And so that's what we're trying to do.
And what would you say to the folks over on the GOP who are really confused as to who to vote for and who might be interested in after the primary, of course, jumping party lines if they feel it's necessary?
That's a harder one.
Yeah, sorry, that's a hard ball, but no, it's a necessary evil.
You know, some of my best friends are Republicans. My dad is a Republican. Just because you're a Republican doesn't mean that you have to support Matt Gatez. Matt Gatez is not, a good person. He's done nothing for Florida. He's been there for 3 terms, going for a 4th, and has accomplished nothing for our district. He can't work with his own party, and they won't support him in bills that actually should be passed. And he's written some of bills that have needed to be passed, and nobody will work with him. We need somebody who can actually get something done for our district, and God would never do something intentionally to try to hurt other people. And it doesn't have to be angry. You don't need to be angry. You can call me and tell me what is wrong and tell me how the government is in your way or needs to step up, and I'll do it because it's what I'm supposed to do. It's a job, and I'll actually do the job. And we don't have that right now.
Well, we're looking forward to a very interesting race come November. Hopefully, we'll be able to cruise past all the bullshit and stand on the truth for a while. That would okay.
Cool.
And how can people get a hold of you, contact you, contribute to your campaign? Because I don't know how much the support the Democratic Party is giving you right now, because they tend to pick winners and losers or decide where to throw their money. I'm hoping that they're supporting. But if not, where can people support you?
So we're trying to make our website easier to get to because my first name is spelled strange. So you can go to votejones2022.com, and that will take you to our main website. It has donate links, everything that you need. We're also on, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, not Twitter. But that's a whole other story in and of itself. But yeah, you can email me. I answer my emails. We always are willing to meet with people in the district. Doesn't matter what viewpoint you are. So please reach out, volunteer, donate. It's important that we really mobilize this November because this is an important election.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you've earned your badass badge from Carlos, you are well on your way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebekah. Appreciate you coming on.
All right. Bye, guys.